Unshared.
All right, good afternoon, UMA. Welcome BPERG. Welcome UMA as a whole. Hey Tom, how you doing? We are here today to welcome Dr. Giani Clarkson. If you were here for February, this is not an unfamiliar face. He was here in February to discuss some Black history facts, and he did such a great job. He has now been invited back. So the first time you're a guest, second time your family. So now we are going to, I want to just give a brief overview for those that weren't here for the February meeting. Dr. Clarkson is a graduate of Dillard and Concordia Universities. He's a chemist who has pioneered various programs in the District of Columbia's public schools and public charter school system, leading to increased student success, college admission, and lifelong goal achievement. He strives to make learning fun while giving every child a chance to make their dreams into reality. Dr. Clarkson has been a Ford's Theater Oratory Fellow since 2013, National Award-winning social studies teacher, educational television producer and writer, playwright, and motivational speaker. This month, we wanted to close out, well, a couple more days, but we wanted to end June with a kind of different celebration or reimagining or different way of thinking about Juneteenth. And we wanted to focus on the evolution of the Black family. This lecture tracks back to Monticello and highlights one of the biggest gifts a parent can give to a child and how those elements are still seen in today's society. The lecture discusses how America's first free labor force tries to fight for family ties in a capitalist society. Dr. Clarkson will also discuss how pulling the Black family apart through slavery has been a tremendous hurdle the community continues to overcome. So Dr. Clarkson, this is your floor. Let go.
Hey, good afternoon, and thank you so much, Danielle, for such a warm introduction. I'm very humbled to be back with you all. Truly, you always know the marks of if you did a good job, if they invite you back. If you don't get invited back, you just know you better try a lot harder the next time. But I'm really humbled, of course, to be along with you all and talk about a topic that I'm highly intrigued about. This is one of the lectures that I give. I'm going to be very transparent. This is one of my favorites. And it's one of my favorites because it requires us to think a little bit differently about the building blocks that make up the African-American family and the African-American experience. So let's have some fun, family, along the way and learn a little bit along the way as well, too. All right. So I think you all have disappeared. That's one of the things. All right. So now you all are there. I can't see you all's faces. That's the one thing I don't too much care on this point of view. Oh, let me go back and try this again. Let me see. Can you? All right, let me try this.
We could see your screen. You had it.
You could see my screen,
Yep,
but you
we could,
okay.
yeah.
So that was good. Let me go back and do that again. Oh boy. All right, so let me do this. Go here. And maybe if I just do this. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's get it.
Yes.
So the journey to Monticello, the history of the Black family. A lot of people don't know this, but what is Monticello? Monticello, believe it or not, is the home of Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson built this home around the age of 14, 15 years old. And when Monticello is built, it's considered basically to be a capitalistic dream. It's an economic dream. Here we have a plantation that's 5,000 acres that produces nails, iron, numerous crops, tobacco especially. There's wool, there's dairy, there's textile. It's the picture of modern evolution. It's like I said before, it's a Disney world of what a capitalist dream should be, because on this property, there has all these various things that are accessible to a consumer, and it's produced by a sitting president, not only a sitting president, but also a president who's one of the forefathers of the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights. He's one of the writers of this, all right? To talk about how important Monticello is, a lot of people don't know this, but look at the University of Virginia's logo. University of Virginia is, of course, a university that was founded by Thomas Jefferson, and the rotunda of the University of Virginia is the same as the rotunda of Monticello. In fact, all of the buildings on University of Virginia's campus, the quarry that these bricks come from inside of Monticello, and the same quarry that comes from the same bricks of the things that are on University of Virginia's campus, they come from the same place. So that's to show you how much this is loved by many historians and how well thought of he is. Monticello is considered to be this brilliant moment of economic evolution. But at what cost? Better yet, let's do this. Just for a second, I want everyone to imagine that you're having a child. What would you name that child? And what is the reason why you're naming that child? Just give me 30 seconds of thinking about this. Imagine that you're having a child. What would you name that child? If you're a parent, you can already think of that name, right? And what's the reason why you're naming that child? All right. I'm going to look at you all's faces. I'm going to pause here. All right. Having a child. And while you do that in the chat room, just type in what would your child's name be. And if you want to share a little bit more, talk about, well, why would you name this child this name? All right. Let's see what we have in the chat real quick. All right. Renzo, Rebecca. I'm still in a complete shock that I'm having another child. That's fine. Micah, love it. Probably a junior. Maybe a family name. Penelope, I love that. I'll name it Isabella. Beautiful name. It's one of my favorites. Light, because it spells dark. A parent's name. All these names. Layla. All these names are really London. I have a good friend named Clayton. Love this. Beautiful. I love meaning gift from God. Love this. My child's a junior. His dad wanted him to keep his legacy. All these names are absolutely beautiful. And I love the creativity and the story behind all these names. Mary, after my girl, Nigel, love this, right? So let's look into something that's kind of peculiar here, if you don't mind, right? After life, the next important gift that a parent gives their child, well, is their name, right? Well, let's look at this, okay? If you go to Monticello, there's this very weird thing that happens here. There's this statue of Thomas Jefferson, and behind him are the names of all of the slaves that have worked at Monticello. Let's see here. There's Lucy, 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 yet another Lucy, 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 Lucy. There's Molly, Molly, Molly. There's a case, an Aggie, 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 Betty, 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 Beverly, Beverly, Beverly. So there's no Londons, there's no Myers, there's Martin a whole bunch. None of the beautiful names that you all suggested are on this list. So the natural question would be, why are so many names on this list repetitive? Well, the reason why a lot of these names are repetitive on this list is because Thomas Jefferson and many of the slaveholders that were on slave masters that are on Monticello's campus were not interested in learning new names. In fact, many parents were given a very uncomfortable decision to make. Well, I want to name my child London. Well, I want to name my child Light. Or I want to name my child Aida. I want to name my child this name. I don't want to learn another name. You can name your child London, but do understand I sell London, but Betty can live here. So what do you name your child? For many people, they followed suit and they realized that they weren't really giving birth to a child, but yet another employee. This is the destruction of the Black family. The second most important gift that you can give your child is its name. But yet, even in the building of a family, you couldn't name your child. This is the blood that's behind this fortune that, of course, empowers the capitalist society that is a part of what we know as the United States. Take this consideration, right? In the first 10 years that the United States is in existence, that's 1786, the United States is one of the richest countries in the world. Well, how does this happen? Well, it happens because it's built on the backs of a free labor force. So the big question of what separates us or separates the black family, well, to quote my father quote my father perfectly, the answer to most things in life is money. And unfortunately, we're going to look at how this capitalist society pulls apart the African American experience. It's pulled apart in slavery, the Reconstruction of the South, a corporate America, and a media. And we'll go through all these four touch points and explain this walkthrough, right? So let's get to it on this end. I want you all to look at these pictures. There are two pictures here, and you can just point out what are some things that you notice about these two pictures. We'll look at picture 1 and picture 2. Ready? Picture 1 and picture 2. Tell me what you notice about these two pictures. All right, I'm going to give you all a couple of more seconds to look at these pictures. Tell me what you notice about these pictures. Picture 1, picture 2. Picture 1, picture 2. All right, I'm going to go look in the chat room and see what you all notice about these pictures. People on the move, crowded people, sense of migration, no facial details, overcrowded versus free space. People are traveling. People are traveling. Pick one is together. People are moving. Crowded. Everyone's traveling. One is busy. Two is relaxed. Both are traveling. Picture 1 seems more restricted. Picture 2 seems more liberated. Working class transitioning from field to office. Paths. I like that. Thank you so much. Travels with family, families with clumps. All these are really, really sophisticated answers. And I want to go ahead and go back to this because I want to talk to you all. City life and business, no faces are seen. Nice. So let's go back and look at this, right? If you notice in picture 1, you have 3 cities that are here: Chicago, New York, St. Louis. These are all cities that are compared to the South are in the North. And there's a crowdingness that's happened. This is happening at a train station. Right here, you see people that are walking. And this is another migration pattern that we have here. This is people leaving the South and going to the North. This is from a series of paintings that's known as the Migration Series by an artist by the name of Jacob Lawrence. And what he did was he captured one of the first major transitions or one of the first another major tear inside the Black family, which is North versus South. Inside of the Migration Series, there are about 60 plus some panels that describe at one time or another this migration that's happening between the African American families of the North, between the African American families of the South. I love these paintings dearly. And you're seeing that this represents a tear as well, too, right? So let's get to it. The African American experiences is going north, but the roots stay south. And why does this happen? Many African American families see a look for opportunity. We know that if you're living in the South, your life or your financial means are always going to be tied to agriculture, tied to, once again, a form of slavery or a form of working the land. There are many African Americans that no longer wanted a part of that. Now, a big misconception is the belief that all African Americans move north after Reconstruction or post-slavery or post-Jim Crow law. No, many Black families stayed in the South, and that caused a tear, right? The promises of the North, right? There are promises that are inside the North, promises of economic freedom, that you can make a business for yourself, that you can attend a college for yourself. Let's think about the structure of HBCUs. We have, of course, Cheney, which is in Pennsylvania. We have Howard, which is in DC. We have Hampton, which is in Virginia. That is completely pulled away from a segregated South. And most importantly, some African Americans just want a change of scenery. That causes a pull, right? So now we have two major pulls that's happening: a group of African Americans in the North, group of African Americans in the South. And how do those people, though they're separated, get back to the South to see family members? And part of the African American experience, of course, is the love of reunions. But there is a difficulty for African Americans traveling north to get to the South. We know here recent history about the Green Book. The Green Book is a book that's written by Victor Hugo Green, which had a list of pathways that were safe for African Americans to travel and made sure that they avoided sundown towns. For people that don't know, sundown towns were towns where if you're African American, you did not want to be in those towns and when the sun went down. Why? Because you could be jailed, killed, who knows what could happen to you. So you're seeing that even that connection of trying to get back down south to family becomes very difficult and problematic, right? So let's look here. This is why I talk about a second form of slavery that happens. And of course, I mentioned the sundown town. Also, another thing which are called movement laws. Believe it or not, when many African Americans decided to transition from the South to the North, many Southern whites realized that they were losing a cheap labor force. And this cheap labor force was how they attained their wealth. So what they do, they put in place what are called movement laws, which meant that it was unlawful for African Americans in certain communities to travel without getting the proper votes of white neighbors in the not white neighbors that they had. Could you imagine that? You having to vote for you to go on vacation. Everybody in your neighborhood has to vote to say if it's okay, because you might destroy the economic status of what may happen. That alone just sounds crazy to me. Like, that's absolutely insane. And there was a fine to freedom law as well too. If you were caught packing up your home with the idea that you were going to relocate from the South to the North, the whites in certain neighborhoods, especially when we think about like parts of Mississippi, Arkansas, parts of Louisiana, Georgia, they made Black families pay an economic loss fee, which said, hey, if you don't pay us, the neighborhood, a fee, we're not going to allow you to leave this neighborhood. Now, there were some that were able to escape, but there's some that wasn't. And that, once again, causes a pull on the African American family, because now there's bigger separation of North and South. So we have a separation of North and South. We have a separation of economic freedoms. We have a separation of educational opportunities. And these tears cause many wrinkles in time. Why there's certain aunties that don't speak to other aunties, why certain cousins that don't really know each other that well, brother against brother, sister versus sister, and the list goes on, right? So just to show you all something, and I want to go back to this imagery right here. This is also from the Jacob Lawrence series as well too. And this talked about one of the pains of trying to migrate, that if you were caught migrating. Now remember, this is not slavery, you all. This is not Reconstruction. This is 1930s, 1940s. If you were caught leaving the South without paying certain fines, or caught in sundown towns, or caught underneath certain movement laws, you were jailed. And you were jailed, and we talk about the level of incarceration rates amongst African Americans, but they're very, very high. In fact, the railroads in the South were constructed by an African American labor force that were imprisoned. Um, Many of the Gandy Dancers that you may have heard of, and I don't know if any of you all have heard of Gandy Dancers, but Gandy Dancers are a group of men who worked on railroads and sung call and response songs, right? These call and response songs are very, very popular inside of like cadence, and Mama, Mama, can't you see? Like, that's a call and response song. In fact, many Gandy dancers sing a completely different version of I've Been Working on the Railroad. Now, we know that I've Been Working on the Railroad is a very childish, kind of upbeat song, but I've Been Working on the Railroad is actually a song of an oppressed man who realizes that they no longer, oppressed African American man who realized that he's no longer going to be able to see his family anymore, right? Let's go here. I've been working on the railroad All little long day, I've been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. And you notice that's a lot slower than the happiness that we hear this song. These are the call to response songs because these men are knowing that they're on chain gangs and this life is completely torn. Once again, pulling African American men away from the family. And of course, now causing a culture of single mothers that completely destroys that imagery of the African American family. Let's look at some charts, right? Here we go. So when we look at charts, right? Charts, numbers, as the old saying goes, people lie, but numbers don't lie. Let's look at some numbers and talk about the evolution of this incarceration. One major thing is that in the modern history, when we talk about the destruction of African American family, we talk about the school to prison pipeline. And for those that don't know, this is a reality. In fact, being someone who's in secondary education, has taught in secondary education for well over a decade now, walking into a second decade, which is insane to me. Right, time goes really flies by when you're having fun. But this school to prison pipeline that happens is a world where prisons have become this privatized industry that realizes that based off of the number of times a child has failed a class, number of times a child has been suspended, number of times of absences, that this leads to a jail cell that's already going to be built. This is really weird that due to this equation, failure of classes, absences, suspensions, go ahead and build that jail cell. Why? Because we know that it's going to be full. That to me is completely eerie. But let's look at this behind the numbers. This is a recent chart, and this is the effects of jail on African American families. We see that 40% of students expelled from U.S. schools each year are Black. Well, if you're expelled, how do you get a quality education? Now, a lot of times when people say expelled, they're thinking just of high school, but we're also talking about trade schools that happen between the ages of 9th and 12th. So we're talking about 13 to 18. 70% of students involved in school arrests or referred to law enforcement are Black or Latino. So we have correction officers that are inside of a lot of our public schools. And if 70% of them are arrested, then where do these children go? Because now they already have a record. 3.5 times black students are 3.5 times more likely to be suspended more than white students. And it's literally for the same exact thing. But yet, if African American students are suspended more, how likely are they to go ahead and graduate? Which goes down to the next thing, that Black and Latino students are twice as likely to not graduate high school as whites. So now there's a push to go maybe get a GED. And a lot of people think that getting a GED is easy. Believe it or not, there are most adults right now, if you told them to take the GED test, wouldn't pass because it's gotten harder and it's a lot more difficult than people see. There's also an element of foster care, which of course pulls into the African American family as well too. 50% of children in the foster care system are Black or Latino. Let's talk about my school community, especially where I teach at. There's about 40% of our students that are being raised by a non-traditional parent. Non-traditional parent means that they're not being raised by a father or a mother, that they may be being raised by an aunt, an uncle, a grandmother, or a grandfather, or some other type of caregiver, maybe an older cousin. That's a part of the destruction of the African American family. Now, 30% of foster care youth entering the juvenile justice system are placed because of various behaviors where, related behavior classes. So if you're a juvenile who is brought to a jail system or inside a incarceration system, there's kind of no way for you to turn the corner. And that's completely unfair. 50% of young people leaving in foster care will be unemployed within a few years. And also, for students that do, or for people who leave foster care to go to, after graduating high school, they try to go to college. Sometimes that pathway is extremely difficult. With our past graduating class here in my educational community, we had 3 students who were foster care students, and we had to find creative ways for them to be able to get funding, grants, financial aid, because there's a desire, but they don't really have the support of a mother and father or any other family members. That's part of a deconstruction as well too. And of course, 70% of incarceration or inmates in California state prisons are former foster care youth. So you're seeing how this becomes full circle. That if these things are not right, that's there. 68% of males in states and federal prisons, they do not have high school diplomas. And in many federal prisons, they're taking away the pathway for GEDs to happen for our incarcerated people, right? Out of lifetime, we know that three African American males will be incarcerated in their lifetime, and we're looking at general the Black and Latino population of incarceration compared to those that are just in general population as well too. The Black family's in trouble, but it's been in trouble for a long time, and it's been in trouble because once again, all these, believe it or not, are capitalistic moves. Well, how is jail a capitalistic move? Can you explain this? I feel like I'm missing something. Can you connect those dots for me? Sure, I can. The American Legislative Executive Council, known as ALEC, the ALEC helps to write laws that, and I'm just going to call it what it is, help to write laws that create an imprisoned population. Why? Because all these organizations that you see here, well, let me be fair here. It's very important to be fair. In 2007, all these organizations left ALEC, but at one time when they were a part of ALEC, ALEC was helping your senators, your congressmen write various laws so that there would be an incarcerated bunch. The reason why for if you get arrested for marijuana compared to being arrested for cocaine, why are those laws? Why are those things different? The behind the stand your ground law, why is that different? Why is that placed? If who has a gun in what neighborhood compared to who has a gun in another neighborhood, why is that different? And we think about how it really targets African American families, and what it does is that it creates a profitable system. Because what happens is that on your bottle of Kraft ketchup, there's an inmate that's putting that label on, being paid pennies and a dollar. So if there's more inmates that are there, these organizations in some way are making some type of money. It's a lot to take on. But as always, there's hope. And that hope comes inside of navigating the change in the media, right? We know that there, and I highlighted these 5 primary shows as being changes in what is on the news versus an African American experience that really does exist, right? So, of course, I had to start off with The Cosby Show, a show that was put together so well that there were psychologists that were actually on the writing staff to make sure that they analyzed each scene to see if at any time where there's imagery that was damaging to the African American experience. Of course, this led to a spinoff, which of course is A Different World. During the time that A Different World was on the air, the enrollment of African Americans inside of HBCUs jumped tremendously. In fact, I'm a byproduct of A Different World. Many of your coworkers who attend HBCUs are probably a byproduct of A Different World. They saw A Different World and saw themselves at an HBCU. HBCUs, of course, stands for Historically Black College or University, and this is what A Different World did. Both of these shows that are right here, A Cosby Show and A Different World, which of course are connected shows or Different World is a spinoff of The Cosby Show, but it showed a middle class family. Let's go with The Cosby Show right here, where the father is a doctor, the mother is a lawyer, and they have kids that are successful. A Different World, the different arrays of African American people from California, Texas, New York, Detroit, where all these people came from, and once again, how they're all trying to achieve Black excellence. Yes, there were problems that they did have, but it is a highlighted view of what was temporarily on media during this time, right? Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Now, during the 1990s, though this is a non-conventional Black family because we have a cousin that comes in from Philadelphia to California, there's a lot of love there. There's once again the fact that you have two lawyers that are there raising children. These Black folks are upperly mobile. In fact, they're inside the 1% and doing a lot of amazing things. So that is kind of highlights another view of the African American experience. My Wife and Kids, which I always feel is a show that does not get the love that it deserves, created by Damon Wayans. But Damon Wayans has this show where it's him and, of course, a successful wife, where they're a middle class family that experience real problems, experience real things, but once again gives a different point of view of the African American experience that is in a complete reversal of like Good Times, which was a very popular show at this time. And last but not least, which of course is leaving this year, which has left this past year, which is Blackish. Blackish, strong family, various skin tones. Blackish dealt with some very controversial issues as well. There's a great Juneteenth episode about colorism inside the African American family. But once again, lots of love, lots of success. We're seeing them this as a positive image, and they really are upper echelon as well too when we look at the life and the house that they live in, right? So we're seeing more and more that the Black family today is evolving, right? What used to be a husband, a wife, and a child has now evolved to families that are LGBTQ as part of the evolution. We're seeing families that are non-traditional, where there may be one primary caregiver with raising children. We're seeing, of course, a more traditional set as well too, with a mother, a father, grandfather in the picture, auntie, uncles as well too. But although these things are all there we have to be very aware that the attack on all of this wonderful Black excellence is connected to a capitalistic design of pulling us apart from one another. Well, how do we break this? We break this by being wise in our choices, by empowering our communities, by understanding that it does take a child to raise a village. And we know that most importantly, that though this terminology sometimes comes with a negative connotation, that no child really should be left behind. They are all our children, and that's why our job is to pull them along the way. You guys can look this up, but the phrase is called Sankofa, Sanokfa, Sankofa. A Sankofa is a bird that is always looking forward and reaching back at the same time. The Sankofa spirit is what really builds the African American experience perfectly. Because although we may lose people along the way due to the incarceration, due to violence that happens in the street, and all these horrible elements, it should always be our job, as though as we rise and though we climb, we're pulling someone along the way. That's what helps build these strong Black families that are essential to what we need, right? The African American experience does have its challenges, but most importantly, we always want to make sure that as we climb, we're pulling each other along the way. Thank you for allowing me to be here, and I hope I've done a good job. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. So we have an abundance of time for questions. So feel free to raise your hand. I will call you, or comments or questions or what have you. And we have time for it. So go ahead and raise those hands, and I am paying attention so that we can get those questions answered.
I'm laughing because I can't, with the way the screen set up, I can't see all these comments and everything. So I'm laughing and everything. It's a shout out FAMU, shout out PVU, Dillard University in the house over here. I appreciate you. Yeah, Cheney. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Dr. Clarkson? Comments, concerns?
I really do apologize. I actually just chimed in.
Okay.
You all have a recording. I could play it back of the meeting.
We do. We are recording it as we speak. So yes, there will be a recording.
Okay. You're going to send it in the chat, or you can send it to me. It doesn't matter.
I'll drop it in the chat. It'll
actually
drop itself in the chat once we finish the meeting. Thank you. All right, Kendra, you are up first.
I want to thank you so much for being here today with us again, Dr. Clarkson. My question is about the sundown towns. I know that there are, quite a few in like the Panhandle and other states kind of around there. What would you suggest if it's something that we wanted to, how do we go about getting rid of those areas that are unsafe for, people to even be able to drive through, people that, they're scared to travel because they worry about what time they may be stuck in these towns and the repercussions that come. How can we fight to get rid of those, basically?
Yeah. So thank you so much for your question. It really boils down to the fact of the people that are there are going to have to realize that it's a problem. Now, if they don't think that it's a problem, it's not going to change because that legislation is something that has to come internally. These sundown towns have been in existence, forever. That's why, I mentioned earlier that Victor Hugo Green in the Green Book, which was an actual book that he created. That's the reason why that book became so important, because it really helped many African Americans stay out of the way of these towns. It's not going to change until those people in that town realize that it's a problem. That's a local legislative concern. So I would like for it to go away, but it's not going to get better until those towns understand that.
Thank you, Kendra. Next up, Ms. Paulette.
Good afternoon, Dr. Clarkson. This was wonderful. My question is segregation. We have a book club, and we were talking about some of us was talking about segregation, whether it was a good for us or bad for us. I remember growing up, being military. For us, we had our own schools, we had our own doctors, we had our own lawyers, we had our own identity. But then when segregation came, it split us as a family apart. Or when my mom was a nurse and my mom worked the daytime, my aunt used to watch us at night. But then when that came and she moved far away, it was like no family members, we were left alone. How do you feel about that?
So let me do this. It should never be, for me, the issue was never the fact of, integration is bad. It's about the management of how integration happens. And I say that it's on the African American experience, that inside of integration, there should never be a concern of you losing oneself or losing the importance of those things that are important to you, like taking care of one another, like the reading. And I think that sometimes that strong hold that many African American families held on to inside of cultures, inside of ethics, inside of work, the grip got a little loose because we're segregated now and everyone's in on the hustle. And that's not necessarily was the case. We see in many occasions where, unfortunately, that's not the case. And that's why I think a lot of problems do happen. The goal, I believe, is that as African Americans travel through these spaces, that you never lose grip of your personal culture. You never lose grip of those things that, of course, hold you dear to your belongings and your moral center. So that's why I believe I'm never going to believe that it was a bad thing. I think that it was a mismanagement on our end. So that's all.
Thank you. Next up, Robbie, the floor is yours. Robbie, if you're talking, you're on mute. Can't hear you. Okay, we're gonna move forward. Lorenzo, come off mute.
All right, and thank you so much, Dr. Clarkson, as well, to great presentation. One of the things that I, kind of looked a little bit closer at is, some of the names that you mentioned, behind of the wall and so forth. And we saw a lot of names that, were similar. And it kind of brought me to the idea of like, kind of like fatherhood as well too, right? So young men, of course, trying to grow up in this, hyperinflation world, and a time where, persons are looking for the best deal, as far as, being able to have the most money to create a family, right? And just have that legacy in general. I wanted to ask you from your point of view, what are some tips that you would give men that are trying to, potentially start a family and start a legacy, and how we could be able to not only create that, but be able to sustain that for a long period of time? Because we see a lot of things like, broken homes and so forth. The only way that we could really get better is if we could work together. What are some tips that you would say from your point of view?
For me, I think immediately about the relationship that I have with my son. And the first thing that I think about is my son and I's dedication to community service. There's not a month that goes by where we're not at our local soup kitchen, not at a local homeless shelter, and we're giving back. The great Muhammad Ali said that community service is the rent that you pay for the life that you live. And I never want the Lord that I serve to say that my rent was always due. And I never paid it, right? So I think that by showing your son or your daughter that these are our responsibilities of building an interconnecting society, that's how you build those strong relationships and ties, right? Dr. Martin Luther King, who I, of course, read, adore, he has this very great quote about the interconnecting society. I believe that in his series of quotes, there's a quotes that get lost all the time. And inside of it, he says that I can't be what I want to be until you are what you want to be. You can't be what you want to be until I am what I want to be. We're all connected. It's all a part of the interconnecting society. And I think that when we, as men inside of our community, and especially and women too, represent an interconnecting society, we stop seeing the differences in one another and start seeing more and more that we're more so alike. I tell my son all the time, and he's extremely smart, honors classes, be a senior this upcoming year. I said, though I'm so happy that you're smart and the things that you achieve academically, what makes me proud is that you are a good person. That's what it is. Those trophies and these degrees will all disappear. You can get buried with them if you want to, if you want to. But the truth of the matter is that how you're going to be judged is on how you treat people that have less than you. That's a mark of how families are going to be really built. That once again, it goes back to what I said earlier about that Sankofa mindset, that as you climb, you're always reaching back, because I can't be Dr. Clarkson, but at the same time, nose down my people or punch down. I can't be that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Robbie, are you with us?
Can you guys hear me now?
Now, yes, there you go.
Yay. Hi, Dr. Clarkson. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
So my question is pretty simple and straightforward, Dr. Clarkson. I actually wanted to know, since you're from the DC area, correct?
I'm here living in the DC area, but I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan.
Okay, I was going to ask if you happen to know Dr. Zoe Spencer, because I know she's very involved in DC, in the community, and she was actually one of my professors at Cheney. So I just was curious to know if you happen to know Dr. Zoe Spencer.
I don't, but if there's someone that I should know, I'm always happy to meet somebody.
Okay, I think you should know her. And the crazy part is as I was sitting here, like literally you took me back to my college intergroup and ethnic relations class, like the information that you were given and just the whole energy. So I just want to thank you once again for just providing this to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Humble. Really appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Dr. Clarkson, you might be one of my favorite people. I also hail from the Wolverine State. All right.
Yeah,
next up, Miss Capri. Hey, Capri.
Hey, friends. Of course, we have to start by thanking you for being here, Dr. Clarkson. We always appreciate anybody who stops by and gives us their time.
Thank you.
My question is, you mentioned about pulling your brothers and sisters up and kind of helping to lift everybody up and sustain that. So I'm one of those people who believes that, like, you can have a passion for something or you can have faith in something, but that without any type of work is absolutely dead. And so what are some ways you think are best to help us lift up our brothers and sisters? Even if maybe I know some people feel like I don't always have the time to get out and go do community service or whatever it may be, but we do still want to put in, not me particularly, because I do community service, but we may still want to lift up our brothers and sisters in other ways. So just what are some maybe impactful ways that we can do so?
It can honestly start small, and it could just be the fact that you're doing just once a month, 1 hour. And that's really what it is. Just once a month, I'm going to give 1 hour because I know that that's the hour I need to give, right? If it's not once a month with 1 hour, if you can't speak with your hands, speak like this. And what I mean by that is speak with your coins, speak with your dollars. This past year, I was very excited after I received my doctorate. I remember saying, you know, God, whatever, if this is gonna be rough, but once I come done, tell me what my next steps are, right? And immediately what turned in my next steps was that I decided to create a book scholarship. And it's something small, right? And I said that I was going to give out $300 to whoever had the best essay and everything else, right? And I was kind of embarrassed because I was like, man, $300, it feels like nothing. And then sure enough, what wind up happening is that people start pouring, seeing that I was trying to give a gift, started donating to my cause, and I was happy to give away 5 scholarships. So I'm just saying that if you just start small, you know, don't worry about don't worry about I guess when I say don't worry about is this big enough? You just need to give something. And that something may motivate someone else's. You've probably seen that commercial where it says what one good deed will do. And, you know, someone that has a good deed that happens to him, they in turn do a good deed for someone else, and they turn do a good deed for someone else. So that's what I'm saying is just start small. Don't worry about, well, I can't give 2 hours. Give 30 minutes. If you can't give 30 minutes, give $30. But anything, just continuously give, and you'll be surprised what can happen.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, next up, Ms. Bennett, you're up.
Dr. Clarkson as well. I learned a lot today through your presentation. I just had a quick general question about Juneteenth. I know it's recognized in quite a few states as a federal holiday. Do you think Florida is going to be a paid federal holiday anytime soon?
I would hope so. But I think that also that leans onto legislation and how the people of Florida speak about this. You know, I know that that's really where the turning part comes. We can do everything in our power to say that we don't need to teach critical race theory. We can do everything in our power to say, well, that's Black history. But the truth of the matter is that it's not Black history. Juneteenth is not Black history. It's American history.
Yes.
And it's really a discussion on how America, unfortunately, failed the African American experience, and how these people, though they were failed, continue to hold on to the dream of what America can be. I still believe in the dream that America can be. So, like I said, I hope that the people of Florida get active as far as their legislation, put pressure on your legislative bodies to do something, you know, and say, listen, this is important and this needs to be taught. And if it's not taught, then what? So that to me is, I think is very important to not overlook. So my hope is that it will, like, mind you, where I'm in DC, I hosted a festival in DC, went to Maryland, had another festival, you know, different places. It's going really well. So I just want it all to be a place of where we're able to build out, so to say.
Do you think it will be like a July 4th eventually if we do fight for that?
I hope it's not like July 4th at all. And I'm being very careful as I say this. I say this with the disgust and I say this with the well-placed disgust and historical placement of Frederick Douglass. So when Frederick Douglass was asked to give a speech on what to the slave is the 4th of July, he was actually given the opportunity to speak on the celebration of the country's, founding on July 4th. He went out of his way and gave his speech on July 5th and explained that this is utter nothing more than mockery to me in my experience. So I believe that Juneteenth needs to be separate from July 4th. Juneteenth really should be a celebration of when we all started some way the pathway of becoming free individuals. And July 4th is a celebration of a separation from a country. One's a breakup letter, right? Like Declaration of Independence, I love this conversation. Declaration of Independence is a breakup letter. America basically told England, I don't want to go with you no more. You trifling, you dusty, I don't want to go with you no more, right? Whereas Juneteenth is a discussion of there were people that got left behind in the dreams and promises of America. And still today, there are people that are getting left behind in the dreams and promises of America. So there's and I think that's where it should be different.
So I totally agree. I was just hoping that Juneteenth would get as much recognition as how we give to July 4th. So if we could ever get to that place, but Juneteenth, as you said, with the history of it, us being separate, definitely keeping that into mind.
I'll say this though, it has to be an ownership of us. If it's going to be as big as July 4th, then we that want to celebrate Juneteenth have to go all the way in. Like we can't, there's to quote one of my favorite hip hop lines of all time. There can be no such thing as halfway crooks. If we're going to rob history and do it correctly, go all the way in. And that way, whenever July 4th comes, we go, oh, that's happening.
All right, thank you so much. Next up, Ms. Jennifer Robinson.
So yes, I really don't have I just basically have a comment. So I still live in one of those little towns that doesn't really recognize African Americans like they should. A few of our friends have, and as myself, we did, speaking of Juneteenth, we have I want to say infiltrated the Juneteenth, and we have started a thing that we have every Juneteenth now for the past couple years for the kids. And myself, being a biracial parent, I love to learn information about not only just everybody in the community, but definitely African Americans, because I had to teach my son growing up that you are not only white, you're African American, but when you're pulled over by the police, they don't see your white mama, they see your black daddy. So I had to teach my son that growing up where he grew up at and where we live at, because there's still some officers and some people where we live that are prejudiced, just to be honest with you.
Right.
And I had to teach him that growing up. He's 20 now, he's graduated high school, he has a very good job, but living in the community that we did, even though my son's family, his great grandparents were the first African Americans to settle into this town that we live in, they still weren't recognized up until just a couple of years ago for that. So it's very prejudiced still where I live at, but it's moving forward, and that's why I like to learn everything I can, just to be able to teach him that, because I teach him about the African American side, and I teach him about my side of the family, which is very different from his side, from the African American side. But he's always grew up knowing that he was biracial, and that no matter what, he was going to be labeled as a black man, no matter if you're biracial or not. They see the black side before they see the white side. And I just find it, horrible that we're still dealing with this in 2022. And I find it horrible that they don't want to celebrate Juneteenth as a whole, but you can celebrate things, that really aren't appropriate for all races. And so that's why we're fighting where I live at, you know, to kind of bring everything to all races and say, hey, like you said, Dr. Clarkson, it's just not for Juneteenth is just not for Black Americans or African Americans, it's for history in general. And we're trying to bring that out, you know, and they're coming around, but you know, it's a slow process, but it's a process, and you have to be willing to fight for that process if it's something you believe in. You know, we sponsor children at the local youth league that play football. My son grew up playing football with the local league, and not everybody can afford it. You know, black, white, whatever. It's not, you know, it's a money situation at this point. It's not just a what am I looking for? The word. You guys know what I'm talking about. I can't think of it right now, but it's not just a money. It's a money situation where it's affecting everybody right now. And if we came together as a community instead of wanting to fight everybody in the community because of what race you are and want to be divided, then we can produce a lot of other things and get a lot of things on the bills and move forward as one race and not as a human race, instead of just as, oh, you're black, you're white, you're this, you're that. No, we're all human at the end of the day. And that's a big.
All right, thank you so much, Jennifer. I want to make time for these last two ladies. Brittany, you're up.
Hi, Dr. Clarkson. I want to tell you that I have been looking forward to you speaking for since we found out. I've been looking forward to it, and you did not disappoint. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a bunch of questions that I was writing down, but I'm gonna give them to you quickly, okay?
Okay, I'll be quick too.
I wanted to know, how would you suggest our companies such as UMA continue to support us in our Black experience? Because I know Thomas Ramada was like, I'm quick to send an email about like, oh, this, because I think that, and he's very responsive. UMA is awesome at this, and I do respect them as a company. I applaud them at the efforts that they do make. We are awesome as a company in that. But how do you think these companies can continue to support us and let us know that they are an ally and they support us in our Black experience?
So I think that we're going to have to change that now. I don't really want allies. I don't.
Okay.
And I'm explaining the reason why. Whenever there is a situation when someone says, oh, I'm an ally, I go, that's cool, but allies have a way of jumping out the way. I'm not interested in anyone jumping out the way. We're going to rob a bank. I don't want an ally. I want a co-conspirator. We have to really think about how we are. I'm trying to think, am I muffled right now? Can you all hear me?
No, we can hear you.
All right. I don't want an ally. I want a co-conspirator. And what I mean by that is that with a co-conspirator, you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. And when you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound, you navigate and you move a lot differently. And that's what I think this is going to change. So inside of Fortune 500 companies that I've talked to probably over the past 2 years, I've encouraged them to really look at what does it look like for you to have monthly reading clubs that explore many different authors who have different points of view of the American experience. Because we know that, try to make sure y'all can still hear me. I feel like I'm paused.
We can't see.
No, we can hear you. Your image is a little squirrely.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so at 1 o'clock, I don't know what happens in this building, but the internet gets real shady. So anyway, the internet goes on lunch break. So anyway, all that to say is that I want us all to really think about how we're building out capacity to really show all visions and images of America. I think that by doing that, that's how we support and become a lot better.
Okay. I've been over here. I don't know if
Brittany, I'm so sorry. Brittany, I'm so sorry. I want to make sure Aaliyah gets her question in. I'm so sorry. Okay. Thank you so much. All right, thank you. Aaliyah, let's wrap it up for me, sister.
All right, real quick. My question was, how do we remain vigilant where we know that these topics can be a trend that people jump on and it's good for the time, but how do we sustain and make sure that we don't tread so lightly, but go all in and make sure it's a continued conversation, whether it's in our home, in our schools, in our churches? How do we do that?
So you do it by making sure that whenever you see it, you say it and you change it. So what should happen is that if there's a room full of of white people that are in a room and they consider themselves to be the leaders of an organization, someone should look around the room and go, we're doing this wrong immediately. Don't wait for someone who's outside the room to tell the people in the room that room is wrong. That's where we lose a lot of times, because by the time people find out, oh, we're doing something wrong, half the time it's too late. Being forever cognizant that we are not a melting pot, but this jambalaya of all these really great things that make America great, right? And I mean that as far as like this melting pot idea that trying to melt down cultures to fit in this cookie color mold. No, we're not that. We're Black, we're white, we're Italian, we're Irish, we're, Asian, we're, LGBTQ, we're all these various things. And when we do that correctly and we're vigilant in making sure that everyone's represented in all elements of a country and all elements of Fortune 5s, then we're really living the American dream. And that's why I think that's important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clarkson. Thank you all for coming to today's Journey to Monticello.
Oh, I wanted to do one last thing.
Okay,
if I have the time. All right, let me get you out of here on this and make sure that my internet is not acting crazy, which I feel like it is. So you know what it is? I'll send this to you all. For people that are concerned about what does the Green Book look like,
give him just a second for that to reconnect. Okay, it looks like we might have lost him. I will make sure that I get back with him and get the information about the Green Book that he wanted to share. And we'll make sure that we post that in the ERG channel as well as the Yammer channel. Again, thank you guys so much for coming. I hope that you learned something, you were enlightened, you were inspired. And until next time, UMA, take care. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Danielle.
See you guys. Amazing presentation.
Thank you.